Yeah, there's a ewe there. There were 5 came up through there. Yeah, that draw has just got to be full of sheep.
Wildlife biologists Vic Coggins from the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife and Lloyd Oldenburg from the Idaho Department of Fish and Game are checking up on some old friends.
Well, right now they've dropped from at least a dozen ewes and 16 lambs down to where I can see about 5 or 6. But they've fed around into a big draw there.
For the past 20 years, these two men, like doting parents, have been following the progress of the various bands that make up the bighorn population here. There's a good reason for their unflagging interest. In the mid-70s, Lloyd and Vic were instrumental in restoring the bighorn sheep to Hell's Canyon. Historically, this country was teeming with wild sheep. Pictographs and petroglyphs portraying the bighorn hunts were etched on the canyon walls by Native Americans throughout the area. The first white settlers wrote in their journals of using wild sheep for food. But at the turn of the century, the influx of thousands of domestic livestock may have triggered the demise of the bighorns by forcing the wild sheep to compete for grazing territory. The bighorn population began crashing, and by the 1930s, wild sheep had become extinct in Hell's Canyon. This beautiful country, perfect habitat for bighorn sheep, lay virtually empty.
Everywhere you look, there's all the things that sheep need for year-round livelihood. They have food, they have escape cover. There's miles and miles and miles of it. Between the two states, we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 650,000 acres here in Hell's Canyon.
It's been 2 decades since the first transplants, and still the population hasn't expanded to reach its full potential. But that doesn't mean they aren't reproducing. The big rams are off on their own, but high on the hillside, bands of females travel the ridges followed closely by newborn lambs.
There's vertical rock cliffs where the ewes go to have their lambs, and they raise them for the first 2 or 3 weeks of their life before they venture out very far.
The sheep are amazingly sure-footed in this vertical terrain, but accidents do happen, and sometimes they're fatal. This little guy is determined to shadow his mother no matter how tough the territory.
And it appeared to me his mother went ahead of him, and he tried running up, and he didn't have enough strength to run up, and he fell over backwards, and then he went around and tried to go up, and he fell off sideways, and then he went all the way around, and he made it up the cliff. But I think there is some mortality from that.
Falling is not the only threat to newborn lambs. They are vulnerable targets, often the victims of hungry mountain lions, golden eagles, or coyotes. Now watch this sequence, shot last summer in Hell's Canyon by photographer Bill Burkett. A single coyote has a whole herd of bighorns on the run, but as you can see, it's the 2 smaller lambs that begin to lag behind. Whether or not the lambs escape is not evident, but such dramas are commonplace as wildlife plays out the balance of predator and prey. Despite these factors, the biologists think this year will be a good one for the sheep herds. The rainy weather has restored the parched earth, and the hillsides are covered with nutritious forbs and grasses. Added to that diet are protein blocks containing the drug Ivamac that scientists hope will help to treat a sheep disease called scabies,
which is a mite that can cause, in extreme cases, a lot of hair loss and finally death.
The sheep we're seeing on this trip appear to be free of the disease. In fact, they seem content to simply bask in the sun or stroll along the ridges, putting on a show for those of us watching from below.
I just enjoy watching them, I guess, and spending time with them. The phone never rings out here. Of course, you've got the rams that have large horns in a lot of cases, the older ones, and then you've got a lot of activity. They're not like deer and elk because you're able to see them out doing things right during the middle of the day.
I'm really not sure. I guess everybody looks at this as the ultimate wild, free, big symbol of a big game animal that lives in the mountains. They've been perpetuated over the ages. You know, every writings from way back are bighorn sheep apparently were the #1 prized big game animal.
Why
And it hasn't changed a lot with a whole lot of people at this time.